Hamid, who writes as A.H. Almaas, is a prolific author and the originator of the diamond approach to spiritual realization. Since 1976, he has taught through the Ridwan School. Almaas's teachings is informed by spiritual traditions such as Sufism, psychology, and scientific inquiry. Russ Hudson is one of the top teachers and developers of the Enneagram in the world. He has been writing and teaching full-time since 1991 and has co-authored with Don Richard Riso 5 best-selling books on the subject, including The Wisdom of the Enneagram and Personality Types. Sounds True recently released his audiobook, The Enneagram, 9 Gateways to Presence. Russ is the founder and president of Russ Hudson Consulting, the co-founder of the Enneagram Institute, and a founding director and former vice president of the International Enneagram Association. All right, with all of that, over to you, Hamid and Russ.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, welcome. And, Hamid and I were talking about this a bit, and we just thought it would be good to have a kind of conversation about the book and what it's about. So the first thing that comes to me as I look at this very big topic, I think, as we all know, the Enneagram is very known now as a typology. And then, well, which type are you? And you figure out which number you are, you read a description and so forth. But what's not as widely known is how that knowledge is useful for people on a journey of inner work, of spiritual development, so forth. And, some of us learned about it a little earlier before it was popular. But what are your thoughts about that, Hamid? I'm pretty sure you learned it early on and more as a developmental tool, but anything you want to say about how this became a part of your view about spiritual and psychological development?
I learned it first as part of a larger package of spiritual teaching.
Yeah.
And as part of that package, as one of the tools for inner transformation and realization. That's how I always understood it. I never saw it as a typology. I saw later, as it became popularized, it became a typology. Just person knowing the type and knowing other people's types and all of that, and which is fine. I mean, it's useful that way, but it's not really the potential, the true potential of the Enneagram knowledge. And that's why I wrote the books I wrote, about the Enneagram.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the same for me. I learned about the Enneagram originally through the Gurdjieff work, and we didn't even have a typology in that. I learned about the typology later, but I realized that held in a certain way, it would be very useful for people who were doing inner work, who were trying to live with more presence, shall we say. So one of the things you really make very clear in the book, and I think something that maybe many people listening tonight might be aware, but something we can't really say too much, is that the Enneagram, it has a lot to do with the relationship between ourselves in presence, our essence, and ourselves in personality, or the patterns we become identified with. So obviously you learned some things about this in your early journey, but were there also times where some new ideas or revelations came to you about the way this could be useful for people in the diamond approach, or for people seriously engaged in spiritual work?
I mean, the way I developed my knowledge of the Enneagram, further knowledge than what I had already known, received, is that it is as a contribution to Enneagram knowledge in general for the general public. It wasn't just for my students, but for everybody who was interested in Enneagram. I wanted people to know that the Enneagram has really other dimension, deeper dimension that will be good for them to know, because they know they'll be happier, more complete human being. And if they just stay with the level of typology and knowing one type, the other type, Nothing changes in life. It's just you have it, some kind of a label. Another, just like get your astrological sign and knowing what is the sign. Same thing as knowing what is your type. But if you really explore what does the typing means, how the patterns it reveals, and first of all, if you just take the patterns and the traits to be that's what you are, you're already hemmed in, you're already fixated, and that's what's called the Enneagram fixation. Because if you take it to be that's what you are, the Enneagram will be limiting. And Enneagram is supposed to be liberating you from those patterns, from all those traits, so that you could be more something that is not the product of your history, not the product of your condition, not the product of your thoughts, your memory, but something free, something fundamental, which is your true spiritual nature. That is the only part of you that can make you truly fulfilled and can bring true happiness and freedom, from difficulties, limitation, and to also learn the true beauty and mystery of existence, of reality, is to really go to that level. And the Enneagram is one of the good tools, one of the good methodologies that was created for this purpose. So it's sort of a waste to think of it only as Taba or use it just for business, which are all good. Okay, to use it for business, for industry, for this and that. But that doesn't really do it justice and doesn't do you justice, the person who's reading it, who's learning it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely my own experience too, needless to say. As I said, when I learned the Enneagram originally, I learned it through the Gurdjieff work. And we originally were looking at it from the point of view of the three laws, the law of one, the law of three, and the law of seven. And it was more a way of opening up our modality of perception, to really explore what does this law of three mean? But one thing about the law of three, and I'm very curious to hear your views about this, because I know it's been an important part of your teaching. I think one of the things I like about the Enneagram and the law of three is it's a way of bridging paradoxes. It invites us to see things that seem like contradictions and find the deeper truth that holds these paradoxes. So, for example, one that I have learned a lot about from you has been this interesting paradox of being, on one hand, consciousness, true nature, something that's beyond time and space, right? But on the other hand, also a human being, and a human being with particular characteristics. So I always found the Enneagram a nice way to begin to explore that particular paradox of how can we be a consciousness and a particular human at the same time. So do you have any, thoughts or illuminations about
I
that?
think this is one reason why there's so many Enneagrams.
Yeah.
There's so many Enneagram, many levels of Enneagram, fixation, passions, virtues, holy ideas, and
Right.
contemplation. I mean, why are they all there?
Yeah,
What's
you
the
also had
point of it?
108 of them.
Right, there's lots of them. Why are they there? Why are there so many Enneagrams? Obviously, there is a big picture here, a very deep and profound picture. And it is true, the Enneagram is one of those teachings that shows the relationship between our timeless nature and our human nature that lives on earth. Because our human nature, our human individual humanness with our body and mind and consciousness that lives and has a personal life, and how is that related to something fundamental, more fundamental, beyond time and space, that can be infinite and eternal, and how the two interface.
Yeah.
And some spiritual teaching do that, and the Enneagram is one of those that has a very specific actual map, topography of that.
Yeah.
And this book, of course, the keys the Enneagram is it does that. It shows what is the relationship for each type, for each number. What is the relationship of the characteristic, of the external personality, to the inner nature, but to a specific way, the inner nature. So each type actually is a way to access a certain way that the timeless nature can manifest. So the 9 points can reveal 9 ways that this beautiful eternal nature can manifest, we can experience.
Yes. I mean, what I was so struck by when I started learning from you many years ago, and also what you have written so clearly in this book, is how specific some of those relationships are. It's quite remarkable how particular structures of our personality relate so directly to qualities of spirit or essence, that it's not random.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I mean, it is amazing that it is like that. I mean, how did that happen? How is there a map like that? And that people are taken by that at the beginning, especially when they see how the type fits them so well, and they're taken by it, and they say, "Wow, that's interesting, amazing." But when we recognize the deeper dimensions of it too, that being, for instance, a type 2, for instance, that that's always wanting to be close to somebody and always trying to be special to another person. A relationship is very important to them. Is really all that is pointing to something, that some way we could experience our true nature, which is a kind of love that connects, love of connection, the connecting love that is pure, like when we feel it, like a pure nectar, like liquid sunshine, sweet, like honey. And that quality is really, is without it, there will not be the characteristic of point 2.
Right.
Characteristic of point 2 are an attempt to sort of express that, but indirectly through some kind of unconscious kind of unconscious, some kind of approximation or unconscious twisting of the original meaning, because we don't know that truth directly, immediately. So, but we have some sense of it. So our mind makes something that we tend to idealize. We want to be like that, and we develop our personality in such a way around that kind of idealized quality, idealized way of being a human being, which is really for point 2 is around that emerging quality of liquid love.
Yes.
For instance, that's an example to illustrate. When we say, spiritual nature, we mean a presence in this case, like liquid. The emerging love is a presence, is a beingness, but we feel it as almost as a substantial nectar that flows through the consciousness, flow through the body, make us feel more present as what we are, but the presence of a heart in a certain way, as a love that is generous, that is giving, that is sweet, that is comforting, that everybody wants from their intimate relationship. Everybody wants from wanting to be connected to the community, and they want that, and they always feel that I'm not completely getting it, and this and that. But of course, you can't completely get it because it is part of your heart. You can't get it from somebody else.
Yeah. That was a big part of what was so amazing, mind-blowing for me when I began studying in the Diamond Approach, is the discrimination of how essence or consciousness comes in these different flavors, comes in these different expressions, and that each one of them is significant for our development. And you taught us about how different spiritual traditions hold some of those. But also, what I thought was so cool about the Enneagram is, as you're saying, is that it's showing how each structure of personality is trying to get back to a certain experience of that presence, but trying to do it without being present, which of course cannot work because it's an aspect of presence.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to do it by first, it's an approximation.
Yeah.
And second, it is really a distorted approximation. And then it is an attempt at getting it from the outside in our relationship and to other people in the world and to groups, and where it is really right in our heart.
Yeah.
And it is not something you get. It is something you already have, you discover. And so that is true about spiritual nature in general. You you discover in yourself. But the interesting thing that the Enneagram actually, that the Enneagram, there are all these 9 types, and each one of them highlights one of those qualities.
Right.
And if we really understand the type, if we investigate the pattern, investigate the quality, the traits, and the preferences of that any type, and see that it is all based on a constellation around an image that we idealize of what we want to be as a human being. And if we recognize that image, or that sort of image or a quality of how we want to be, a character we want to be, that can bring us closer by seeing the distortion, how it is an approximation, what is an approximation to.
Mm-hmm.
And if we find out what's an approximation to, we might have access actually to a particular quality of our eternal spirit that is not usually easily available, not readily available to everybody, because these qualities are not readily available to the average person. The average person is looking, and their identity in the outside is based on the approximation, and they're believing that distorted approximation, and they're dealing with other people who believe they are the distorted approximation.
Right.
And we have a network of people who are all distorted approximation, and we have a world of distorted approximations. Well, it is all really the upper layer of something really wonderful underneath, that hidden, waiting to be discovered.
I will never forget years ago you doing the teaching about the elephant who thinks he is a mosquito.
Oh yeah.
It's rather like that.
Uh-huh.
You were talking about if the elephant thinks it's a mosquito, he's trying to improve and become a better mosquito, and he's trying to find a mosquito soulmate and all. But the problem is he has not seen who or what he is. He does not know his nature, and so he's bound to get into some trouble. I always love that metaphor.
It's a good story. It's a good, actually, ancient Sufi story. But it is called the teaching story, and that, in fact, when the Sufis tell those stories, they're talking about humanity in general.
Oh yeah,
they're talking about most human beings. Some human being get bit by the spiritual bug, which is not a mosquito.
No. It's a different bug.
Any bug.
More
And
than
then you can't help it. You have to find out the truth. And that is what it means to be in a spiritual path. It's not because you're trying to be a star, or you're trying to be successful. It's more like it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter even more important than that. So you have to find out. You need to find out. You love to find out. You would love to be close to that truth. And that is really what characterizes somebody who's interested in knowing who they are. If they really want to be genuine and real, that's what it means. You see, spiritual people are not no bullshit people. Meaning, You want to be real? You can be real not by lying to yourself, but by seeing how you're lying to yourself and lying to other people, pretending to be somebody and believing things that are not true about yourself, like the patterns of the particle type. If you believe that's what you are, you're lost.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You're lost. I mean, you're going to continue being lost, and you won't develop as a human being, and you won't find your true potential, and your potentiality of the human being, of the human consciousness, is the totality of the spiritual universe, which is much bigger than the physical universe.
Yeah. Pretty big.
You know a lot about that already, Russ,
Yeah.
from
It's
experience. Yeah.
yeah. And then, those of us who start to know that, it's a little bit of a suffering when you see people come to the front doorstep of the palace, but they don't go into the palace.
Right.
It's that's the sort of another paradoxical thing I think about the Enneagram. The Enneagram can get a lot of people more interested in the journey of truth. It can, under the right conditions, because everyone wants to know more about themselves, and they find the descriptions, like you said, and they go, wow, that describes me so well. But if they only stop there, that's what I'm saying. That's like staying on the front doorstep. You're not going in
Right.
to
Yeah.
the journey. But I think one of the great contributions of this book is inviting people off the doorstep, is saying, okay, good, you're finding out something about your personality, and there isn't so much more to you if you really want to take the journey. I think that's I think the challenge for the whole field of the Enneagram at this time is, how do we make more people know there's so much more to it than just describing our personality. And that's if we get it right, of course.
Yeah.
Many people
I
get
remember.
bodied in it.
Yeah, I remember when I first was writing the book. I've had the material for a long time, since the time I wrote the Fast of Unity, 2 decades ago. But when I decided to write it, is because first recognizing that the Enneagram is spreading. The Enneagram community is pretty big and is international, and has many people involved in it. And I was thinking, well, it'd be nice if some of those people get to know themselves in a deeper way. How can I? Because I'm always trying to do something useful, one way or another. And I said, well, I did something useful I could do because since the larger group of people, if I write something that they relate to, which is the Enneagram, and bring it into a depth that they might not know, might have not suspected that exists in the Enneagram, that some of those people will have the opportunity to go beyond the doorsteps.
That's exactly what I'm hoping your book will bring.
That's my idea. That's why I actually wrote it, hoping that some people will to take a few more steps, and that the book will help them in taking those few more steps, and to learn how that what they have known about themselves to be, the kind of type of personality they are, is really an outer shell of something. Regardless how good or wonderful they think they are, it's nothing compared to the real thing that they are beyond, at the core of this shell.
Yes. Yeah, and you go into some details about that relationship between the core and the shell in the book, is certain psychological structures that how I always think of in Buddhism, they in the Eightfold Path, the first of the Eightfold Path is right view.
Yes.
And I just really have come to learn from that tradition, to respect that you can have all sorts of helpful information or practice, all kinds of things. But if you don't know how to hold it, how to look at it, how to enter into that understanding, you're not going to get too far. And I really think a big element of what I get from this book is it's helping more people have a right view about the material.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Ross. I appreciate that, and it's the right view. It's not only of the personality, but the right view of how the personality type is a surface manifestation of something deeper, and how the two are connected. The relationship with the outer world with the deeper inner spiritual world. That's a very specific, detailed relationship and very precise for each type, actually. And it is an interesting kind of knowledge that the Enneagram gives us, detailed knowledge, because many spiritual teachings they talk about, being the self or being the consciousness,
Yeah.
being the self or the individual, the ego, or being true being. And it's all true, but it's the Enneagram sort of unpacks the story and make it into 9 ways. And so expand the story and show that no, there are 9 different kind of people, each one of them their sense of self and their spiritual nature or true being is a specific relationship that's different from the other people, which I think can be of great help of knowing, for oneself. If instead of being general, you just know, okay, I just need to be free from my ego, and learn about my essence. I mean, it is true. Everybody needs to be free from the ego to be their essential nature, but it's not specific enough as which type of ego and what quality of essence that it connects to. Because that's why I call the quality the key. Because if you also connect with the quality helps you be free from the restriction, the rigidity of the patterns. It doesn't mean that the patterns are wrong or bad, but if there is a fixation or rigidity, we have to be that way. There is a limitation of freedom.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that the Enneagram hooked me in the early days, it was not because I was interested in talking about personality categories. That was interesting, but that was not anything that would have drawn me to devote my time and energy to. But it was, I suppose, being in different spiritual groups and seeing people struggle with the same issue over and over and over and over again for years. And it wasn't that they weren't sincere. They were very sincere. They were really doing their practice. They were diligent, but they were not seeing something about themselves, And in Gurdjieff work, we used to talk about chief feature.
Right. Yeah.
The characteristic that, as we said in that school, that spoils your life.
Yeah. Now,
But
I'm sure you were dying to know what your chief feature was at that time when you were the Gurdjieff group, right?
Of course.
Because Gurdjieff never said, here are the chief features. He didn't say that.
They don't say
he knew
that.
it, but he didn't teach it to everybody. So everybody was guessing, what is my chief feature?
And you kind of hope one day your teacher will tell you, because that's the way they do it in that tradition. But I realized the Enneagram, from that point of view, was a way of exploring what is my chief feature. Yeah. How do I keep getting stuck, even though I'm sincere, even though I'm doing some kind of spiritual practice? What usurps my work is another way I've thought of it. Which makes me think of something else I wanted to ask you. So curious. Obviously, people can and do apply the Enneagram to a lot of different spiritual paths and traditions. You can be a Buddhist and it can be useful. You can be a Sufi, it will be useful. You can be a contemplative Christian or a Kabbalist or any kind of spiritual practice. You can apply some of the teachings of the Enneagram and it will help you. Right. And I think that's true in part of its universality. But what I'm always curious about in my own exploration is how important is it to know, in some sense, that there is within the Enneagram its own transmission. Like you allude to this a little bit in the book. But I'm just curious what you're thinking about that these days.
Well, I think, well, I mean, the Enneagram knowledge is a transmission.
Yeah.
It comes from an ancient school,
Yeah.
and they put it out as a teaching,
Yes.
and it has their energy, a particular energy of that ancient school, which is a wonderful energy, and because it is to help a human being continue as a true human being, and their true humanness to emerge. Which humanness, our true human is not really known without knowing our spiritual nature, because our humanness is multi-layered, multi-level, multi-dimensional. And I think, in terms of other spiritual teaching, using the Enneagram for their particular path, I mean, I'll be interested to see how they do it, and I think it can be done, and they might come to, if they really explore it enough, explore the type and how it connect to the spiritual teaching, they might start learning about the qualities of presence.
Yeah.
That might not be there in that teaching. For instance, some teaching have it, but not all teaching have it. And because the Enneagram is, comes from as I said, from an ancient school, Salmon Dark, the collectors of honey. So honey, the liquid sweet honey, is a very important part of that teaching. And the idea of the Salmon Dark is that the collective honey, and that the human being, that they, as a community, their job was to develop themselves, to develop their true nature, so they embody this honey of the spirit, and to keep it. So that it keeps, so there always be people who have that, which by the continuity of those people continues something very real in humanity. The humanity doesn't develop as just an external thing.
Yes. Yeah, you see similar notions in many of the great traditions that you need certain number of human beings to keep the lights on here. It's various ways, but I think I feel there's something real to that. I also feel, and I'd be curious your thoughts about this, that when Gurdjieff brought this fourth way teaching out at the beginning of the last century and was telling people about it, he was saying one of the characteristics and the reason for the appearance of the Enneagram, and he was quite specific about that, was because it was a time where help was needed for a lot of people. That, there was a generosity, a disbursement of some of these teachings that had been hidden for a very long time, but it was time for people to find their way to some of these teachings, or I like the way you just talked about, to find a way to come to the honey. And it's one way that I feel more okay about the popularity of the Enneagram, even though some of it I will think is a little confused, but it means people are looking for something.
Yeah, I mean, just the same thing as the popularity of mindfulness, for instance.
Yeah.
But mindfulness, the way people learning it, is not really the essence of that teaching.
Right.
You have to go very deep beyond just being aware of your surrounding, whatever, to be able to connect to the Eightfold Path of Buddhism and get to the experience of no self and all. So yes, you're right. I agree. It is good that the Enneagram is becoming a popular thing, because that create channels that are possible for people to, if they become knowledgeable of that knowledge, there is a possibility that energy, that transformed energy, might become available to them without them necessarily knowing it. They're going to be sort of tickled from inside without knowing, because their curiosity about what is this about, and is it just this? Because the topography, you think somebody created it sometime,
Yeah.
but it is much more than that. It's something that really a way that it's a description of how reality is in different levels, by people who know reality.
Yeah. I think also as it becomes popular, if you're really studying what it's pointing to and thinking about it, it's more likely you might get bit by that bug you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Susceptible to getting bit by the spiritual bug.
Yeah, because you're already sort of, as you said, you're already sort of turning in a certain way, by learning about this tool, which was a spiritual tool to start with. The same thing with mindfulness. I think mindfulness is becoming popular, and maybe that popularity will catch some people to go deeper into the Buddhist path. Most people won't do it, but enough, there'll be more people, hopefully, than before. So the same thing with the Enneagram can capture the Sarmun dark bug and get a little taste of that honey, and they realize, oh, this honey is uplifting. It's not just for your toast.
That'd be interesting. Put that honey on your toast.
Yeah.
A very interesting effect. Could be like the spice in Dune.
One thing I want to bring in about this book, that the book, because there are 9 facets, and the book goes into each description of the type, and how recognizing the description we can penetrate to something deeper. I want to bring in one other point that brings this deeper, which is the point 4, where they always want to be original and authentic and all that, right? That's the ideal for a 4. I am an original, authentic, like the authentic artist or the authentic author, or whatever. While it is the originality, basically pointing, what is your true origin? What's the true origin, which is the true self then, and the quality of the inner nature as the true self. So that's just to give people another example. It's not just about honey. The true self is like a brilliant star with radiance and amazing presence, and the sense of when one experiences that, wow, that's me. That's what I am. But it has nothing to do with your name and shape and your mother and father. But how do you know it's me? But it is inherent in it that it is me. And it's amazing when you see somebody experiencing that. The other day I was doing a seminar and somebody got to that experience. And they said, and I said, what are you experiencing? I said, oh, I'm feeling this thing. What's it feel like? You said, it's me. And I knew what they were experiencing. So it might be a good time to open up to people questions. We talked sort of, enjoying our conversation, which might continue some other time, but we can let others participate.
Yeah, so let's open things up to some questions. Are we going to give people some instructions for that?
Put your questions into the chat. And then, Russ, when you start answering someone's question, if that person wants to make sure their camera is on so that Hamid can see them, that would be great. So get those questions into the chat.
All right. I can read them out loud and just see what they say. We got 2. All right. This is an interesting and rather specific one, Hamid, but perhaps you can say something. This is from Ramtin. In the facets of unity, you identify the beast, in quotes, as a structure of hatred and pride and a barrier to experiencing living daylight or pure consciousness. How do we work through feelings of resentment and opposition to the goodness of God so we can consistently experience loving presence in our lives? Well, that's a big question, but a good one.
Yeah, I mean, what's the name of the person who asked the question?
Ramtin. I
So
know him.
Ramtin here.
There he
Good
is.
to see you, Russ.
Good to see you, Ramtin.
Yeah. Maybe we could see Robkin's face. Does it show up?
Can we pin him? Maybe I can pin him. Let's see if I can. No, I cannot.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
There he is. Now you can see him.
oh, here's Robkin. Yes. Yeah. So why don't you ask me why you asking that question? Why don't you tell me?
Well, yes. As I've been cultivating the practice of bhakti in my life over the years,
I see. Yes.
and even though I experience the goodness of the beloved, I also am aware of sort of some lingering hatred, some lingering sense of betrayal that I haven't been successful of in overcoming or processing.
Yeah. Well, you ask one good question, a good question that most people don't suspect, which is you're recognizing you have resentment or hatred toward the divine, not toward other people. And the news is everybody got it. Even people who don't believe in God, they do resent the divine or the spiritual. Because, from earlier on, from childhood, you feel you sort of abandoned or hurt. You wonder, where is the goodness? If there's a goodness, why am I experiencing this? So there results some kind of a resentment, anger, which becomes a hatred, which I call the beast, because it can't be experienced phenomenologically. And I think that's really the true origin of what the beast means. Because the beast is sort of what hates the light, right? And this is a part, like, even though you recognize it's the light, it's the love, you still can't help but hate it. And the way to work through that is to first recognize that, you are recognizing, and then to understand where that come from. What made me experience that? And there's a story to it. For each person, there's a person's story that has to do with all the way back in their childhood. We didn't grow up with it. We were not born with it. However, we developed it as we grow a self. So it become part of one dimension, one layer in our ego self. So recognizing it, I think, is the beginning of being free from it. And then recognizing its story, where it's come from, and letting ourselves experience it. Experience the anger and the hatred. And the hatred turns into a power, an amazing power. And then before you know it, I remember when I experienced the beast. In fact, my story, first time I experienced the peace, the way it happened, I woke up from sleep seeing the number 666 in the sky, in the air. I said, 666, what's that? I looked, and I didn't know at that time what 666 was. And I looked in the dictionary, it turned out it refers to the beast, to the devil.
Right.
And then later on, I started feeling all these things you're talking about, and then I became like a beast, black, dark, humongous, powerful thing that says no to the light, to the nur, to the truth. And by experiencing and understanding it and where it came from, and then it transformed to become a servant of the divine.
Thank you so much.
We need to understand the story of it. Yeah. So good luck with it. I am really glad that you recognize that, and it makes sense. And the bhakti thing, which you're devoted with love, is important for divine. That can emerge as a barrier. And I hope all the Bhakti people begin to recognize they don't just have love, they also have resentment inside them. And they have to be free from that resentment for the heart to be full, totally complete, pure, and just love. You see. Otherwise, that part of the heart will be closed off.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. That illustrated for many people, I think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Going back to the questions here. All right. This one from Bernard. Hello, Bernard. Two things. What factor makes for developing this fixation rather than another one? I guess you're asking why do we end up with a particular fixation, right? And second, does realizing the core of the shell or the essential aspect, does realizing the core of the shell, the essential aspect, mean that this is our particular contribution to the world? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, who asked this question?
Bernard Guy. And there he is. I know.
Here's Bernard.
Hey, Hamid. Hey, Russ.
Hi there. Good to see you, Bernard.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to
Yeah, I'm more interested in the second question, though.
Yeah.
I'm reading your book right now, but the first one came on enough. I've been studying the Enneagram on my own since a long time, and some people try to answer that, but it never feels quite satisfying. Why does somebody develop? I guess.
Yeah. I think it is, I call it in the book, your true endowment.
Okay.
Inherent endowment, in the sense that we come into the world with this quality is particularly strong in us, particularly available to us more than any others. And then when we begin to realize it and experience it, it becomes a reality. That's what we are, part of what we are. It becomes a gift to the world. Then that is the light you give to the world.
Okay.
How you like to be a light into the world?
I like that. I'm a 5, so I like that.
Yeah, so you'll be a wonderful light for the world, for others. Yeah.
So what would be the relationship with that, with talking about the heart of the fixation as the essential aspect, as the heart of the fixation?
Well, the essential aspect, I call it not the heart of the fixation. It is the inner quality that the fixation is trying to emulate.
Okay, I mean more, maybe it's not the right expression.
Talk about the core.
Well, more like the inner lines that the 5
the inner lines.
Like the heart point, the security point, all that stuff. Yeah,
the heart, you mean the inner line.
Right.
So each type has its heart, which is the point that comes before it, according to the inner lines. And that quality is very strong in you in childhood, usually.
Okay.
And it's in childhood, dominates in childhood, but as you grow up, become mature, it's more the quality of your type that becomes more dominant.
Okay, so
but they both become dominant. Like for me, I know that both are present. Okay. And in fact, the one from the heart, from the childhood one, made the other one be stronger, be more available and easier to express.
Okay.
Yeah. So they cooperate that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully you'll find that in your experience.
I actually do. I can see the 5 part is obvious. I've been always, interested in understanding and knowing, but I also can see, and the more I've been into inner work, I have also a very strong passionate side, and which is more like innate.
Yeah. So the passion and the strength of that passion make it easier for you to open up to knowing things that could be scary, that could be too big, you see. So it aids in the capacity to know and understand, because the inner journey is a big adventure, and it's not an easy adventure, as you know.
Yep.
All kind of twists and turns.
Yep.
Ocean and valleys, and some of them are big thing on the way. And so especially if you really want to find out, you're curious, and you want to understand what is the truth, what is there, what is around the corner, you need to be courageous to do that.
I agree.
Yeah, so you know that from your experience. Good to
Yes.
know. Talk to somebody who knows from experience. Wonderful.
Thank you very much for this opportunity with you too.
You're welcome. Yeah.
You. Okay, we got a few more. I hope we can get to some of them. All right, here. This is one from Benjamin Goldman. Ben, he's asking, do you have a perspective on the Enneagram of change? I think meaning the Enneagram of process, the process Enneagram, like how things move through a 9-point system. With Gurdjieff, it was very complex. Well, yes, it was. And I don't know. What do you think of that, Hamid?
Does that mean Enneagram change mean moving along the lines?
Yeah, that Gurdjieff and J.G. Bennett and some of those teachers talked about how you could describe a process and the elements of a process through the Enneagram. And there's different ways I understand that, but I'm curious if you work with that or have some sense of that.
And, I'm asking basically about the law of 7, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe Russ, you can answer that question better than me. You understand the law of 7 better than me.
It just the law of 7 is just a couple parts that I think people overcomplexify this, and it's sort of like I'm always telling people the point of the categories in the Enneagram is not to cram ourselves into these categories. They're meant to help us be more skillful in self-observation so we can see more clearly what's going on with us. They open our view we don't realize our view is limited. The law of 7, it's not like trying to fit everything into some weird process. I've seen Gurdjieffians drive themselves mad trying to do that. It just becomes a strange intellectual exercise. The important parts of the law of 7 is all organic processes have shock points, discontinuities, points at which you need to be open to something beyond what you've been doing hitherto. You need something else kicked into the system. And there are places where it's almost like starting freshly on another level of reality. And there are little processes and there are big processes. Some of them are our whole life. Some of them we're just a little part of a big process that goes on for many, many, many generations. But the other part of law of 7 is that no process is individual. This is the part where it starts to connect with non-dual teaching. Our ego mind thinks our process is just a single thing that's floating in space with nothing around it. But all processes are interwoven and embedded in an infinite number of other processes, just like the processes that make my body live. Breathing, cellular transformation, heartbeat, blood chemistry, the neural signals. We're a symphony of processes. And when you start to get an idea of that, you start to come closer to, in the Enneagram, the idea of holy law and holy harmony, the point 3 of the Enneagram, where you start to recognize that you're not a separate thing on a static background. You're part of this intelligent flow and movement of everything. So the law of 7 will start with just being aware of a process you're in, but it can open to that bigger sensibility.
And I think our life in general is a process.
Yeah.
And for a spiritual path, the process is recognizing where you are. Where are you at the moment, at each moment? What are you experiencing? And if you really fully experience and understand it, it naturally moves, because our consciousness is always in process. So it naturally moves and moves on to another thing, or another dimension, or another aspect for ourselves. And before you know it, if you really do the path according to the Enneagram, you will see you've gone through all the points.
Yeah.
All the points. You become the whole Enneagram at some point, with all its qualities and with all its holy ideas.
You see the process structured in the same way that facets are structured?
Well, I mean, you might find structure for you individually. I'm not saying that the process will be the same for everybody. Not by structure, I don't mean it. It will be the same for everybody. At least I have not seen that happening. You know, so everybody is unique in terms of their process. And I don't know what Gurdjieff, whether he meant it that way or not, but the way I see it is that process is unique and individual, and it's better not to look for a pattern, but to just follow your own process. But you are always in process, and the process is the process of revelation.
Yeah.
Really, when you understand it as revelation, reality revealing itself at the location you are in, whether it's dual, non-dual, whatever it is. Yeah. So thank you for that interesting question that it goes all the way back to the Gurdjieffian approach that Russ is familiar with. And I think that brings us to our end of our hour.
Yeah. There's some, sorry, we didn't get to all of the questions. There's some marvelous additional questions in there. So maybe some other time we can find a vehicle for addressing some of them. But thank you for coming to join us.
Yeah, I appreciate being with everybody too.
Yeah, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Hamid and Russ, for this wonderful discussion. And everyone in the audience, thank you so much. And thank you also for your patience for some of the technical problems we were having in the background. I'm glad we were able to get everybody in here. We will be sending out an email tomorrow around noon that will have the link to the book and the coupon code, which we'll also put into the chat in just a moment. But that link will also have the email will also have the link to this recording. So we'll make sure that everyone who attended tonight gets that recording, just in case you missed the first few minutes of it. And yeah, we'd love for you to all watch that again. And there's that coupon code. Make sure to take advantage of that.
I want to thank the Boulder bookstore for taking care of this event.
Yeah, this has been really, really wonderful. We've been so happy to have you. Thanks so much for being here. All right, everyone. Okay. Have a good night.
Yeah.